Hi all, welcome to THEP Journal Club seminar. Today we have Dr. Rusa Mandal. She's currently Alexander von Humboldt postdoctoral fellow at University of Siegen, Germany. So today she will talk about, first of all, thank you for accepting our invitation to give a talk in Journal Club on such a short notice. And today she will talk about leptoquarks connecting different shortcomings of the standard model. And okay, since this is an online meeting, I request the audience to unmute their microphones and unmute themselves only if they have questions or any comments. And so with that, I request Dr. Rusa Mandal to begin.
Okay, thanks Arpit for this introduction and the invitation. So I'll be discussing leptoquarks connecting different shortcomings of the standard model. So basically it's a combination of my various previous work, which has been done in like last 3-4 years. So in some cases, I might have forgotten the explicit details. So I would just like to give you an overview. I mean, what are the things it can work. So here's the outline. So I'll be very brief in the introduction. Then basically, I will try to show how this new type of particles, which are called leptoquarks, can contribute to mu G minus 2. So, and then I will move to the discussion on electroweak vacuum stability. And the third part, I will give some brief highlights, like what type of dark matter models we can connect with this leptoquark scenario. Oh, sorry, and I don't have any summary slide. So here, 1 minute. 1 minute. Why I'm seeing this screen all the time? Okay. Yes. So as I was discussing my last talk, yesterday's talk. So leptoquarks are some hypothetical particle which can turn a lepton into a quark. So basically, it can be a scalar boson, it can be a vector. So we generally denote them by the scalars are S and R. So they can arise in R parity violating SUSY models. And the vectors, we denote them by V and U. So they can arise some grand unified theories like SU5, SU4, etc. So basically from this interaction point, you can see like there are only a few types of combinations of the standard model gauge quantum numbers you can write because you have certain fixed number of leptons and quarks and their gauge quantum numbers. So here is a table from a very old paper from 86. So there are like total 10 types of leptoquarks which can be constructed from the standard model gauge group. So some of them are spin 0 and spin 1, and you can see in the fourth column that all of them are colored particles. So because one end they interact with quark and another end they interact with lepton, so they have to be colored, and they have different weak charge. Like some of them are singlet, some of them are triplet and doublet under SU2, and also the weak hypercharge is different. So this was just some search in Inspire HEP. So just I put the word leptoquark and try to see how many papers actually appear. It's a huge number. You can see 2,000, more than 2,000 papers are written on leptoquarks. Basically, that word leptoquarks is somewhere in the text or in the reference. And the first one where this name was actually introduced was by Greenberg and Nelson. And basically this concept of this lepton and hadron unification that was first proposed by Pati Salam in 73. And then the question, of course, arises, what makes it interesting after these 45 years? I mean, this is not some new concept which has just popped up. So this I was discussing yesterday, the reason is like this B anomalies. So today I won't be I mean, giving the details of this, just wanted to mention like there are certain deviations which we have seen. For example, these are called RK star. Those are in this loop level transition of B to SLL. So in the plots, you can see from LHCb data, they do not match with the standard model prediction. They do not match with the experimental observation, and this deviation is at the level of like 2 sigma. There is also some mismatch in the branching fraction. So basically, here I mean, in the second error bar, you can see it doesn't match with the purple band. And I was discussing this point also yesterday, like there are deviations in charge current modes. These are not loop level, but also in certain type of ratios with tau and lepton, there are deviations. So in the plot, you can see LHCb, Bell, Babar, all the experiments have entered into the game, and this red blob is actually the recent average, which deviates from the standard model at the level of 3 sigma. There is also another interesting measurement in the same channel, and same type of deviations are seen here also, this B to C tau nu transition. Now, if we make a catalog B2S versus B2C, so there are plenty of BSM candidates, for example, a Z prime model, extra dimension model, which can directly contribute to B2S transition. Also, leptoquarks are there. And for B2C transition, there were some popular models with 2 HDMs, so charged Higgs can contribute there, also W prime models, and the common name you can find like the leptoquarks. So that's the main reason. I think I have shown this plot yesterday, like what are the different things, and one can combine two leptoquarks, two scalar leptoquarks to address this. So this was just in the motivation. Now let me just write the Lagrangian. Like this is a Lagrangian for the all 5 type of leptoquarks, the scalar ones. So you can see S1, S1 tilde. The first line is S1, second line is S1 tilde, then you have R2, R2 tilde in the fourth line, and the last line we have something called S3. So they have different SU2 charges. So some cases you have 2 or 3 particles differing by electromagnetic charge. And that's any interaction vertex, you can see there is one quark involved, another lepton involved, and another is the scalar leptoquark. So that type of interaction actually gives rise to contribution to lepton magnetic moment. So you can draw the diagrams, Feynman diagrams, which are shown here. So basically a lepton exchanges a leptoquark and a quark, and then it can emit a photon. So these are the typical diagrams which are contributing to lepton magnetic moment. And if we compute the loop here with this scalar particle, that expression is given below. So here you can see that the first line, this contribution arises when this photon is emitted from somewhere from the lepton legs. And in the second line, you can see an enhancement factor, which is MQ over ML. So basically an enhancement due to if you have a top quark flowing into the loop, so you have a huge enhancement in this type of moments for leptons. And all these apes, they are just the loop functions, like functions of the mass of leptoquark and the quark which is inside that loop. So with this computation, we tried to find the different cases for electron and muon. So basically for muon, we have this long-standing anomaly in the muon magnetic moment. So here you can see in the second line, so this deviation is at the level of 3 sigma. So this measurement was done like at the deviation was first seen at BNL, the Brookhaven National Laboratory, and now Fermilab is also running with the same magnet, which has been transported from Brookhaven to Fermilab, and they have started the machine again. And I think, I mean, actually people are expecting data from last year that by now they should have enough data to confirm the BNL result, and also they should make further improvements in the measurement. And from the theory, the muon magnetic moment is very well known, so it's calculated up to 5 loop and in the standard model. And so you see the deviation is like, I mean the digits differed at 10 to the power minus 9 level, and the deviation is at the 3 sigma level. And recently, so we have also seen something for electron. So basically, there was a new measurement of this fine structure constant in cesium atom. So from that measurement, people found that electron magnetic moment also doesn't match with what we have the standard model prediction. But you see, there is a difference between the two signs. So when electron magnetic moment is in deviation is in negative direction, the muon magnetic moment is in positive direction. Basically, that first column where I have written the data. And we find there are 5 scalar leptoquarks which I have shown, but only among them, only 2 of them can actually reduce this deviation. And in the second and third column, I have shown this, what are the values like we need to explain, like the ranges of values we need to explain this this data. So basically these are 1 sigma allowed region. And of course, this is just for the muon magnetic moment and electron magnetic moment. You need to check the viability from other data. So mainly the contribution, the constraint comes from radiative lepton decays. So when, for example, a muon decays to an electron and a photon, so this is a very, very rare process. So it's forbidden in the standard model. And the leptoquarks can similarly induce, if I go back to this diagram, you can see here the final state that lepton can be different. That lepton can be different, so it can give rise to that same mu2 E gamma contribution. And these two couplings will actually relate you with the magnetic moment of muon and electron. So one has to be careful when explaining the data of magnetic moment.
I have a very naive question. So the fact that only 2 of the 5 leptoquarks that we took are contributing to this deviation from the experiment, is it because of that ratio of the mass of the quark to the lepton term?
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's actually a good question. I skipped that detail. So basically, if you see here, this enhancement factor comes with left and right chirality contribution. So this is non-zero only when you have the couplings of the leptoquark both with left-handed quarks and also with right-handed quarks. Okay. So basically, if one of them is 0, then this coupling is not there, and that is what actually is happening for the other 3 cases. So that's why they are not able to reduce this deviation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so yes. So now in this case, we have data, for example, for mu2 E gamma, we have data from MEG collaboration, which is at the level of 10 to the power minus 13. The branching ratio should be less than this. That's the current experimental bound, and I think MEG2 will improve it by I think the order of 2 magnitudes. So I mean, if none, they don't see any event, so the bounds will be roughly 10 to the power minus 15. And for the tau decay, we have the bound from Bauer experiment at the level of 10 to the power minus 8. But I mean, of course, I mean, I think BEL2 can, I mean, also, I mean, BEL2 can be thought as a tau factory. So I have seen that they have the prospects for this type of radiative decays, so that they can also have improvement here. And as you already asked, so you can see for R2 and S1, you have, since you have both left and right contribution, you see the bounds are really very, very strong, like 10 to the power minus 15 and 10 to the power minus 12. So basically, the Yukawa structure of this leptoquark should be tiny, unless, I mean, we should have seen this type of decay modes. So these are very, very constraining. And for the other S1 and S3, even though they don't have the 2 combined contribution, which I have actually shown here also in the expression, the second line. So even if they are suppressed by the lepton mass scale, like one is ml, another is ml prime, So still we can have the bounds. So the basically main message is leptoquarks are capable of explaining these deviations of muon G-2 or electron G-2, but one also has to be careful to explore the parameter space, basically, which are very constrained by this radiative muon decays. At the moment, tau decay, tau decays are also constraining for R2 and S1. You can see 10 to the power 4 to the power minus 7, but for the other, at least order 1 values are more or less allowed. Okay, so another mode can be the same diagram, but in this case, the photon can decay to 2 other leptons. So basically, it's a 1 lepton decaying to 3 leptons. So these are also rare leptonic decays, and here you can have a box contribution from leptoquark, which is shown in the right side of the slide. And in these cases, we have the experimental bound at the order of 10 to the power minus 8, but with further improvement, I mean, will also reduce the leptoquark parameter space. And in the last line, where I have shown this particular mode, this tau2 electron and positron and 2 muons. So those type of modes are only possible with this box contribution. So those are good checks for these bounds. So now I move to the other part. So that was one part, and then the electroweak stability. So we know how the tree-level Standard Model potential for the Higgs field looks. So basically, you can see this Mexican hat potential where we have the value of minima, and that's how this Higgs gets vacuum expectation value, and this symmetry is spoken spontaneously. Now, when we have large field values, then this fourth power of this Higgs field, that's the one which is actually dominating. So then we need to compute the quantum corrections of this parameter lambda. So in the standard model, they are this Bayer parameters. So basically, from the loop effects, you have the running of this quartic coupling of Higgs field. And if you look within the standard model, so I have written this 16 pi square, that expression with beta function for the quartic coupling lambda at one loop order. So here you can see this YT is actually the top Yukawa coupling, and it comes with a negative sign because the fermion goes into the loop, and depending upon the value, it can be at some position, it can be negative, the running of the lambda. So what it means that the potential which I have drawn here, so basically from one end you can again go down and lambda become negative. So in that case, you will develop a new or a deeper minima. So basically, if you have like that, then if the deeper minima, if the minima is deeper than the electroweak one, so you can have a tunneling from the electroweak vacuum to the global one, which is now the deeper one. And people have calculated this decay lifetime, so which is shown here in the expression of tau. And here you can see this is a where this lambda effective enters. And the remedy from this problem was like, if we have this tunneling time, the decay lifetime is greater than the age of the universe, which is like roughly 10 to the power 10 years, then we are safe. We can say like, we don't see this decay of our electroweak vacuum to the global minima, and this type of situation is called the metastable situation. And here in the we have shown that what is the metastability condition. So basically, it says like lambda effective, the running of the quartic coupling can become negative, but not too much of negative value. So that it becomes like, so that the tunneling lifetime is smaller than the age of the universe. Now, this is the situation in the standard model. So this lambda will also receive large contribution from any heaviest particle if we believe they are there. So basically, the running is also sensitive to whatever the heaviest particle we know, the top quark mass. So here is just a plot in this MT and MH plane. So you can see we have found Higgs at 125 GeV and the top mass around 173, and this falls into the yellow region, which is the metastable region. There are 1, 2, 3 sigma regions, and at the moment we are safe because that's where we have found the exact things, but things can change. Like this blob can move if we find some particle higher than the mass of the top quark. So now let me highlight how leptoquarks can contribute. So basically they are scalar particles. So in this case, I just have one example. I mean, this will hold true for all others. So in this case, you see the interaction with the standard model particles is given by the Lagrangian. So the contribution in GH phi, which is the quadratic coupling with the Higgs field, and also the leptoquark in this case is phi. So sorry, I mean, I'm changing the notation again and again. So basically this small phi is the leptoquark and the capital phi is the Higgs doublet. And you see, because of this GH phi coupling, there will be contribution in this lambda running. And of course, I mean, there are contribution from the top quark. So basically YL is the Yukawa coupling. And then when we compute this RG improved effective potential, which is shown here, so this expression for lambda effective, which is given in the first line, we have the contribution from standard model particles, and then in the second line with the red font, we have like the contribution from leptoquark. So and you see it comes with this G phi expression, this GH phi, which is the coupling between the leptoquark and the Higgs field. And now when we try to explore what are the up to what energy range we can be safe, it depends of course on the GH phi value. So here you can see the orange band is for the stability region. So stability region we can at most extend up to like 10 to the power 7 GeV, and for the metastability region with the leptoquark coupling GH phi around 0.3, it can extend up to Planck scale. So basically the instability region means the lambda is very, very negative and the tunneling rate is smaller than the edge of the universe. And then the yellow region is the metastable, where lambda is negative but not much. So I have written the bound in the second line, and the stability region is lambda remains positive throughout that scale. So it means that with this tiny coupling of GH phi greater than 0.3, you can have the running of lambda in the metastable region up to the Planck scale. So basically it is improving the situation in the standard model because it's scalar and it's adding its contribution in this running. So here, yeah, just the schematic plot how this running goes. So okay, this is for GH phi 0.4. So you can see this running actually depends a lot on the top quark mass. So there are different colors for the top quark mass, and in some cases when we we have 177 in the right plot, so in that case lambda remains positive. And it's just a schematic plot for the potential how it looks, but it is in the log scale. So very first the below, it's in the second line left plot if you look at. So there is a very first king is the electroweak potential, the minima of the electroweak vacuum, and then the deeper minima is actually the new minima which has been developed due to the running of lambda. And yeah, and of course that leptoquark coupling makes this tunneling rate greater than the age of the universe. Okay, so now we come to the hierarchy problem. So basically, we know that Higgs mass, they are quadratic.
Rusak, a small question.
Yes,
The previous figure,
yes.
the minima dip is just a reflection around the line 0, is it? Above. So if you flip the minima, look at the figure, that line below the minima line,
Which one?
if I reflect it around 0, then that's it,
Okay.
continue that line, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So that is how
So
the potential is constructed.
yeah, no, this is just in log scale. I mean, so so to show the plots, you see, this is a
Okay,
huge
you're
difference in scale. So it's not possible to plot in the normal
no, no,
this way.
that is not my question. My question is
Okay.
just, you see, it's a little bit strange that the effective potential that you're plotting,
Hmm.
what it looks like is that you take this line which is at the bottom, that line, the sloping line, reflect it around the 0 axis. If you reflect it, it'll just join those top two lines, right? It's just a straight line then. And in some regions, you have just reflected it below. Why
Yes,
is
yes.
that?
I think that's because of this choice, because we have added this factor of 1 here to show. I mean, this is just the artifact of choosing this particular function.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now I move to the hierarchy problem. So we know that the Higgs mass is not protected by any symmetry. So we receive quadratically divergent mass correction from all the particles which are going into the loop. So basically, in the second line at the standard model at one loop level, you see the delta mh square is proportional to lambda square, and then it comes there this quartic coupling, this coupling with the gauge bosons, and the highest, another highest one is the top quark Yukawa coupling. So then this condition postulated by Veltman was like, we need some type of cancellation between fermions and bosons. So basically, that's the condition written here. So you see, so if this, this is satisfied by all these four couplings, so basically this is 0. So we are somehow protected, the Higgs mass, the bare Higgs mass. And this is true when we do exact SUSY. One of the motivation for SUSY, for SUSY, this holds for like all orders, and it's the absence of quadratic divergences are there at any energy scale. And of course, in broken SUSY, we do not see the superpartners as the same at the same mass of the normal one. So we have some breaking mechanism for the supersymmetry, and different models, Feldman condition holds at any particular order, at say at any particular energy scale. So we have also tried to see how much this leptoquark changes this condition. So at one loop, this condition is given here, where the red contribution is the new one, which is coming from this Higgs and this leptoquark coupling. And the higher order contributions are actually suppressed by this loop factor. So which actually modifies this scale where we want to, it is a very tiny modification for the scale where we want to satisfy this Feldman condition, particular loop. So here I just showed for different choices of this GH coupling, if Feldman condition is satisfied at, say, for example, at 10 TeV or at GATT or at Planck scale. So there are different choices of parameter sets, parameter spaces. So where we, basically we can tune this coupling to satisfy this condition where we want. Oh, that was one more point. And okay, so I think I finished the first two parts, and then I move how we can connect this dark matter physics with leptoquarks. So basically, we have seen indirect evidences of dark matter, which are like 26% of our universe from the rotation of galaxies and from also from CMB. So still we didn't see any direct evidence of it, and of course, we have different perspective, like from particle physics point of view. This popular scenario is the WIMP paradigm. So where this dark matter mass is assumed to be in the GeV to TeV range, and it's very, very weakly interacting. And it depends on how it interacts with the Standard Model particle. For example, it can interact directly to the Standard Model one. For example, say through the Higgs or through the Z boson. So those are called Higgs portal, Z portal models. You can also have BSM particles, which are actually connecting dark matter with the Standard Model one. So for example, we can have a Z prime model in this case also. And what are the popular ways to look for these WIMPs? So here, from top to bottom, if you see two dark matter particles are annihilating among themselves and creating some Standard Model particles, and we have some indirect detection experiments. So basically some telescopes which are fitted at the surface of the Earth, and we try to see what type of radiations like photons or protons or some type of particles which are coming from such annihilation from this cosmic ray. So those are called indirect detection of dark matter. And then we can have the production, for example, from bottom to top. You can take two Standard Model particles, collide them, and also produce the dark matter particle. That's what people are looking at collider experiment, for example at ATLAS or CMS. So that's the production of dark matter. And then we also have the third kind. For example, dark matter comes to Earth. In Earth, we have a huge sample of material. For example, some heavy material called something like xenon or some molecules, where we will try to see if dark matter is, even if it's weakly interacting, we have a huge container where it interacts with the material inside, and it recoils the material, or it emits something. So those are called the direct detection experiments. So, and those are the detection through the scattering experiments. So this is just an example. So how we can fit a new dark matter particle into the leptoquark context. For example, the Standard Model sector we have, the dark matter we have, and that's connection we make with the leptoquark. So in some cases, the leptoquark has some particular quantum number when you can easily fit. I mean, it's an automated construction where you can fit Standard Model singlet particle, Standard Model singlet fermion, which is denoted here as chi. So it can be a Dirac particle or it can be a Majorana. And you see that from the first the second line, first two terms, you can have like this contribution. Even if the masses are high, you can have the contribution, like it can decay into 3-body decays, or it can have the 1-loop decay of chi. So we need to forbid such a term. So we can impose extra symmetry, for example, a Z2 symmetry. Then you can forbid the first two terms, and you can be happy with the last term, which is the red one. So basically, just one coupling of a dark matter particle chi, and then the leptoquark here is a U, a vector leptoquark, and then it connects the Standard Model quark U, up-type quark, and it has a coupling strength of Y chi. And yeah, and if there will be no tree-level decay, is this M chi is less than the mass of the mediator, the leptoquark. So as I was mentioning, the annihilation process. So basically, you see, you can have two dark matter particles which are chi here interacting. Annihilating to up-type quark, charm quark, or top quark via the exchange of U. And you can compute the thermal average cross section, which is given here. So we have done this in one work, and the dominant contribution what we find is for the annihilation channel to TT bar. And if suppose we have the mass for M chi less than the top mass, we have the other channels. Other channels are always there, but those channels will be the main one, but that's actually, we checked, it's insufficient to produce the observed relic density. We can have different co-annihilation processes, which is written in the third line and second line. So this is a chi interacting with U, U is the capital U is the leptoquark, and it's creating a top quark and a gluon. And also you can have production of a W and a bottom quark. So there are different channels. So basically the main point here, the model parameters are, I mean, 3. So basically the mass of the dark matter, the mass of the mediator, and just the coupling y chi between them. And so now, as I mentioned, dark matter also interacts with the up quarks. So those direct detection experiments where we want to see the scattering process, we have this effective interaction, which is written in the first line. So basically a contribution which is like a V minus A structure between the dark matter particle and the up quark. So basically the up quark in some materials, say for example xenon, will interact via this type of model. And we have computed the spin dependent cross section, which is shown here. For example, this M is a nucleon mass, and there is this lambda factor, which is actually how much fraction of the energy this up quark is carrying within that particular nucleon. And then you see the main point is here, again the same coupling, this y chi comes here, which is actually required for relic density. So if I go back in the previous slide, in the first expression, this sigma V average has this y chi, and in this case we have the same coupling. So we try to explore the parameter space. For example, here we have in dark matter mass and the mediator mass range, and this red lines, red curves, they are for the correct therefore to get the observed relic density by Planck, and the blue ones are the bounds from direct detection experiments, which is one of these is the LUX, which has the spin dependent measurement for protons. And so basically the region above the curves are excluded, and in some cases the indirect data actually excludes, which are the brown curves, which is the AMS data. So basically there is an experiment, a telescope, which actually measures the antiproton flux coming from the cosmic rays. And since they have not seen anything, so it excludes like the dark matter mass up to 400 GeV. So if it is satisfying the relic. So I mean, this is just some illustration. You can of course build some complicated model with these. And I mean another way will be, I mean, in this talk I was just trying to motivate, like there are different aspects where these leptoquarks can contribute, and you can cook a model where actually all 3 can be combined in one footing. So dark matter, the stability, and also the muon G-2, but of course it requires much more work. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rusa Mandal, for such a nice talk. So, so do we have any questions or comments? So I see a raised hand.
Who? I am not able to see.
Okay, so can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
So Rusa, so what is the implication for leptogenesis or baryogenesis?
Yes, that's a nice question. Yes, of course we can have, for example, if we want to have high scale leptogenesis, we can include in the theory very massive Majorana neutrinos. So basically what I am calling here as a dark matter candidate, that's also a standard model gauge singlet one, and also in this case I consider the Majorana fermion. So you can always make them Majorana neutrino. And I mean, I think I'm not sure whether people have studied leptogenesis in this context. So, but I think it can be generated within this framework, and then one need to have some other processes with speleron and so on to transfer this leptogenesis to baryogenesis.
So this is, but the leptoquarks themselves do not do anything to the story, do they?
No, in principle, we don't have any CP violating process, but of course you can cope with complex couplings, but so basically we need to generate large amount of CP violation, right?
Yeah.
To address those issues, and all this analysis which I was saying, it's with real coupling contribution. So we have to see whether we can generate that sufficient amount of CP violating processes only within the leptoquark contribution. I'm not very sure, and I'm not even sure whether people have done it.
Okay.
So, any other questions or comments? So, I have a question. Like, so how do we decide the coupling H5 that is with the Higgs scalar and the complex scalar fields between? So there were some metastability and stability plots.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so what decides that that coupling parameter?
So basically, in this case, for example, if I show you this plot, so in this case, you see the lambda effective expression. If I show you here, since this parameter enters, so we want this lambda effect.
Actually, I can't see the slides right now. So
Oh, okay.
you would
Sorry.
need to reshare the
I think
screen.
I have stopped sharing screen. Wait.
Yes.
Okay. So now you can see.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. So here you see this lambda effective expression gets contribution from GH5. So the main motivation is like we need this lambda effective to be positive, or you say greater than this value.
Okay.
So how much GH5 we need to do that, up to what scale? So if we want them to be positive until Planck scale, so GH5 greater than 0.3 is fine. But then your question is like, if it is greater than 0.3, why not it can be like 1 or 0.9? So then we have to see other precision test of Higgs. For example, with this GH5 coupling, you can have Higgs decaying to muons or say some other quarks and everything. Those contribution you will have with this GH5. So then you have to see the other bounds from collider, whether you can have an upper bound of GH5. The further you make, the larger you make GH5, you will have larger rate for example, Higgs to mu. Then you have to compare with data and you can get upper bound on that. So from this perspective, you can have a lower bound.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
So any other questions? So if not, let us thank the speaker once again.
Thanks.
So with this, we should conclude the meeting and see you all next week. Okay, thank you.